What does it feel like to be invisible? Not the kind where you blend into shadows or slip past security checkpoints. The real kind. The kind where you stand in a room with 180 people and not one of them sees you. Not really. They see a shape, a uniform, a file clerk, someone who fetches coffee and organizes paperwork, someone who doesn't matter. Rebecca Torres had spent 4 years, 7 months, and 12 days perfecting that invisibility. And on this particular morning, as she stood in formation at Camp Henderson's main training facility, she was about to learn that some masks wear too well. The North Carolina heat pressed down like a physical weight, even at 700 hours. The facility's industrial air conditioning hummed overhead, fighting a losing battle against the humidity that seeped through every crack and crevice. Rebecca stood in the back row of the administrative section, tucked into the facility's far corner like forgotten equipment. At 5'2" and barely 115 pounds, she'd learned exactly how to position herself. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes down. Thick-rimmed glasses that made her look bookish and harmless. An oversized uniform that hung loose, hiding the compact muscle beneath. She adjusted those glasses now, a nervous gesture, one she'd practiced until it became automatic, until it looked real. Around her, infantry soldiers towered like redwoods, Marines who could bench press twice her body weight, Rangers who ran marathons for fun. They didn't look at her. Why would they? She was admin. She pushed papers. She existed in the background of their warrior world, as essential and invisible as the filing cabinets in her office. General Morrison's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Attention! 180 bodies snapped to attention with military precision. Rebecca's response was a half-second slower, deliberately clumsy, the small woman who couldn't quite keep up. Morrison stood at the front of the formation, his steel-gray uniform pressed so sharp you could cut yourself on the creases. At 53, he still looked like he could go toe-to-toe with men half his age. His chest displayed 3 decades of ribbons and commendations. His biceps strained against his dress shirt. He was everything the military valued: strong, confident, dominant. A man who commanded respect through sheer physical presence. His eyes swept across the assembled soldiers like a predator selecting prey. Rebecca felt the moment his gaze found her, that prickle on the back of her neck, that ancient instinct that whispers, danger asterisk. You there, his finger extended like an accusation. Yes, you, behind Martinez. Her stomach dropped, not fear, something else. Something she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. The urge to respond with perfect military bearing, to stand tall, to meet his eyes with the confidence of someone who'd stared down worse threats than an arrogant general. Instead, she ducked her head, let her voice shake. Me, sir. Morrison's smile widened. He'd found what he was looking for. Move it, clerk, we don't have all morning. The soldiers around her shifted, some sympathetic, most indifferent. The administrative personnel were separate from the combat troops, different species, really. One group trained to fight, the other trained to file. Rebecca stepped forward from the formation, her hands moving to adjust her glasses in that nervous gesture she'd perfected. Around her, she heard the whispers, the sympathetic head shakes. This wasn't going to be good. But here's the thing about invisibility. When you wear it long enough, people start to believe it's real. They forget that masks are chosen, that backgrounds are constructed, that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody's watching. Morrison began removing his dress jacket with theatrical flair, each movement calculated for maximum impact. Today's lesson, he announced to the assembled troops, is about size differential and tactical advantage. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that looked like they'd been carved from oak. I need someone to demonstrate proper takedown techniques. His eyes never left Rebecca as he said it. She stood in the center of the training mat now, isolated under the harsh fluorescent lights. The mat was regulation size, 20 by 20 feet, surrounded by 180 witnesses. Some had already pulled out phones. This was going to be memorable. the general demolishing the tiny clerk, a teaching moment about knowing your limitations. Rodriguez, the master sergeant, moved closer with the facility medic. He whispered something about getting the trauma kit ready. He wasn't joking. Rebecca's specialized watch, too advanced for a simple file clerk, if anyone had bothered to look closely, tracked her heart rate, elevated but controlled. Her breathing remained steady despite the tremor she forced into it. She'd learned a long time ago that fear was the best disguise. Real predators don't announce themselves. They wait. They watch. They let you think you're safe right up until the moment you're not. First rule of engagement, Morrison circled her like a shark, always assess your target's capabilities. He gestured at her dismissively. What do you see here? Administrative personnel. Maybe 110 pounds fully dressed. Zero combat experience. His smile was cruel, confident. Perfect example of what happens when you face a superior opponent. The crowd murmured agreement. This was familiar territory. David versus Goliath, except in the real world, Goliath always won. But something happened as Rebecca assumed her ready position. Something so subtle that most observers missed it entirely. Her feet spread to exactly shoulder width, weight distributing evenly across the balls of her feet. The movement was automatic, muscle memory from another life. Another version of herself that she'd buried in filing cabinets and administrative reports. Sergeant Williams, a decorated veteran from the 82nd Airborne, stood near the back of the crowd. His eyes narrowed. "Did you catch that footwork?" His companion looked confused. "Catch what?" Williams didn't answer, but his gaze remained fixed on the small woman in the center of the mat. Something wasn't right. That stance, that balance, it reminded him of something, someone. But the memory was buried too deep, obscured by the civilian clothes and nervous trembling. Morrison continued his lecture, using Rebecca as a living prop. When approaching a smaller opponent, you utilize your size advantage immediately. Observe. He reached forward with exaggerated slowness, demonstrating technique for his audience. His massive hand moved toward her collar. Rebecca's eyes tracked the movement with an intensity that didn't match her frightened expression. As his hand approached, she shifted her weight almost imperceptibly, creating an angle, making the grab slightly more challenging. It looked like retreat, like fear, but it was something else entirely. "Notice how she instinctively retreats," Morrison announced, completely misinterpreting her movement. Classic fear response from untrained personnel. His hand closed around her collar. The grip was firm, controlling, meant to demonstrate his complete dominance. From this position, he explained, a trained combatant had numerous options. Rebecca felt the pressure on her throat, felt his confidence radiating like heat, and for just a moment, just one dangerous moment, she felt the urge to show him exactly how many options a truly trained combatant had from this position. How many ways she could break that grip, break that arm, break him. But she didn't. Instead, she let her voice crack. "Sir, you're hurting me." The words tasted like ash in her mouth, like every sacrifice she'd made, like 4 years, 7 months, and 12 days of hiding who she really was. Morrison's grin widened. This was exactly what he wanted: fear, submission, proof that size and strength determined outcomes in combat. He released her collar and stepped back, addressing the crowd again. "Now we'll transition beyond simple demonstrations. I'll show you what happens in an actual high-speed encounter." The facility's energy shifted. Phones appeared more openly now, soldiers sensing they were about to witness something worth recording. Rodriguez moved closer, his own device ready to capture what he anticipated would be a textbook takedown. "Assume ready position," Morrison barked, dropping into a combat stance that showcased 30 years of training. Rebecca mimicked him awkwardly, arms raised in what appeared to be a clumsy imitation of a fighting stance. Someone in the crowd actually laughed. And in that moment, standing in the center of that training mat with 180 people watching her fumble like an amateur, Rebecca Torres made a decision. Or maybe the decision made itself. Maybe some part of her, the part that had stormed compounds in darkness, that had fought in tunnel complexes where one mistake meant death, that had earned a reputation that made hardened soldiers check their corners, finally broke through 4 years of careful camouflage. She thought about Lebanon, about the knife fight in the tunnel complex that left her arms scarred from wrist to elbow, about the moments where survival was measured in milliseconds and hesitation meant a body bag, about who she'd been before she became invisible. Morrison's voice pulled her back. Now, I'll initiate with a standard right cross. Smaller opponents typically fail to see it coming due to speed differential. He chambered his fist, telegraphing the punch for educational purposes. The strike would come at reduced speed, fast enough to look professional, controlled enough for everyone to follow. 3, 2, 1. The punch launched at approximately half speed, still rapid, still dangerous if it connected, still meant to prove a point about power and dominance and who belonged in the warrior class. Rebecca's response was pure instinct disguised as luck. She slipped left. The movement was clean, precise, absolutely perfect in its execution. The punch missed her by mere inches, cutting through empty air where her face had been a microsecond before. The facility went completely silent, except for the hum of ventilation systems and Morrison's labored breathing. And Rebecca Torres, file clerk, invisible woman, ghost hiding in plain sight, felt something shift inside her. Something that had been dormant for 4 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Something that remembered what it felt like to be seen, to be real, to be dangerous. Morrison's face flushed crimson. "Lucky evasion," he announced loudly, too loudly. "Let's see you avoid this sequence." Without warning, he launched a 5-punch combination at full speed. Left jab, right cross, left hook, right uppercut, finishing left cross. The strikes cut through the air with professional precision and genuine intent. No more teaching demonstration. This was ego. This was a man who couldn't accept that the tiny clerk had made him look foolish. Rebecca moved like water, like smoke, like something that couldn't be caught because it was never really there. Each punch missed by fractions of inches. Her feet glided across the mat in patterns that spoke of training so deep it had become instinct. Her head movement was textbook perfect, her spacing impeccable. And as she moved, her collar shifted, just enough, just for a second. Rodriguez saw it first. The tattoo on her neck, previously concealed by her uniform. Hebrew text intertwined with paratrooper wings and a distinctive symbol he'd seen only once before, years ago during joint training operations in Tel Aviv. The blood drained from his face. Holy. His phone nearly slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. That symbol. He knew that symbol. It belonged to a unit that operated in the shadows. A unit whose members were legends whispered about in special operations communities worldwide. A unit that included only the deadliest, most highly trained operatives in the world. They certainly didn't end up as file clerks in North Carolina. Morrison, frustrated by his failed combination, changed tactics. He lunged forward, wrapping his arms around Rebecca's torso in a bear hug designed to utilize his superior size and strength. It was a move that would work on most opponents. Overwhelming force. Simple physics. It was also a fatal tactical error. The moment his arms closed around her, everything changed. The trembling stopped. The nervous breathing vanished. Rebecca's eyes, previously darting and frightened behind those thick glasses, became cold, focused. The eyes of someone who'd looked at death so many times they were on first-name basis. Her medical alert bracelet became visible during the grapple. Military-grade emergency response technology with encrypted medical data storage and satellite beacon capabilities. Equipment designed for special operations personnel operating in hostile territories. Not something a file clerk would wear. Not something a file clerk would need. Unless that file clerk was something else entirely. Rebecca executed a perfect arm drag, spinning behind Morrison faster than most observers could track. Her movements were no longer disguised. This was pure muscle memory. 12 years of training in the most elite special forces unit in the world. Thousands of hours of practice. Hundreds of real engagements where technique was the difference between mission success and body bags. She secured a rear waist lock, and with leverage that defied physics, lifted the general completely off his feet. The crowd gasped. 220 pounds of muscle went airborne, controlled by someone who weighed less than half that amount. It shouldn't have been possible, but possibility had nothing to do with it. This was training. This was skill. This was 4 years, 7 months, and 12 days of camouflage finally burning away. The slam was controlled but decisive. Morrison hit the mat hard. The impact drove air from his lungs audibly, a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent facility. Before he could recover, Rebecca transitioned to mount position. Her knees pinned his arms with precision that spoke of extensive ground fighting experience. The position was dominant, humiliating, completely inescapable. "Stop!" Rodriguez shouted, rushing forward. His voice cracked with urgency and something that might have been fear. "Everyone stop, I know who she is." But his warning came too late. Morrison, his face purple with rage and embarrassment, tried to buck Rebecca off using brute strength. Pure power. The same approach that had worked his entire career. She responded with a lightning-fast transition to an armbar. Her legs swung over his head as she isolated his right arm with surgical precision. The technique was so smooth, so practiced, that several watching soldiers, many with extensive combative training themselves, simply stood with mouths open. This wasn't a lucky clerk getting a few good shots in. This was a master at work. This was art. "Tap out," Rodriguez yelled at Morrison, his voice desperate now. "Sir, you need to tap immediately." Morrison's pride wouldn't allow surrender. He attempted to stack Rebecca, using his strength to power out of the submission hold. It was textbook defense against an armbar. It might have worked against most opponents. Rebecca adjusted her angle slightly, applied pressure that sent white-hot pain shooting through Morrison's elbow joint. The general's scream echoed through the training facility like a siren. Raw, primal. The sound of a man who just learned that size doesn't matter when skill is measured in the difference between life and death. "She's Desert Rose," Rodriguez's voice cracked as he shouted the words. "Israeli Special Forces, Shayatet 13. The name hit the room like a thunderbolt. Phones that had been recording switched immediately to Google searches. Desert Rose, Israeli Commando. The results that came up made hardened soldiers take involuntary steps backward. The legend was real. The ghost was here, and she had just demolished their general in under 45 seconds. Rebecca released the armbar before permanent damage occurred, rolling backward to her feet in one fluid motion. She stood there, adjusting her glasses with that same nervous gesture from earlier. But now everyone could see it for what it truly was. Camouflage. A predator's disguise. The most dangerous person in the room hiding behind the most harmless mask. Morrison struggled to his feet, cradling his hyperextended arm. His face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Pain, rage, humiliation, and finally dawning horror as he realized what had just happened. What he'd done. Who he'd chosen to humiliate. "Impossible," he wheezed, still trying to salvage some shred of dignity. "You're just a clerk. I've reviewed your file. Rebecca Torres, administrative specialist. Here 8 months. Rebecca reached up and removed her glasses with a slow, deliberate motion. When she spoke, her voice had lost all trace of nervousness. It was replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove because they'd already proven everything that mattered. "Actually, General, I've been here 9 months, but you've never bothered examining support staff files closely, have you? Too busy selecting people you perceive as weak." She rolled up her left sleeve, revealing not just the medical bracelet, but a forearm covered in scars. Not random injuries from accidents or training. These were defensive wounds. The kind earned in close-quarters combat where survival was measured in milliseconds and mistakes were permanent. One particular scar ran from wrist to elbow, white against her olive skin, a reminder of the night that changed everything. "Lebanon 2021, she said simply, her voice flat, distant. "Knife fight in a tunnel complex. He had reach advantage." She paused, her eyes focusing on something far away, something the people in this room would never understand. "But I had superior training." She rolled the sleeve back down methodically, each movement precise and controlled. "You don't understand the difference between us, General. You spent 30 years practicing combat techniques." Her eyes met his, and there was no anger in them, no satisfaction, just truth. "I've spent 12 years living them." The room fell dead silent except for the ventilation systems and Morrison's labored breathing. 180 soldiers stood frozen, witnessing something that would become Camp Henderson legend. The moment a file clerk became a warrior. The moment the invisible became undeniable. The moment they learned that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you never bothered to see. Rodriguez lowered his phone, hands shaking as the full implications hit him. This wasn't just any special operator. This was Desert Rose, the woman who had trained elite forces worldwide, who maintained a perfect combat record spanning over 150 engagements, who had single-handedly turned the tide of operations that would have failed without her, who had vanished from the international special operations community 6 years ago without explanation, leaving behind only whispers and legends. And she'd been filing paperwork down the hall for 9 months. The main doors burst open with a bang that made everyone jump. Colonel Bradley strode in, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the scene. Morrison on his knees, cradling his arm, Rebecca standing calmly in the center of the mat, and 180 soldiers looking like they'd just witnessed something impossible become real. "At ease, everyone," Bradley commanded, though most were too shocked to respond properly. He walked directly to Rebecca, stopping just outside striking distance, a habit developed through years of combat experience, a sign of respect from one warrior to another. "Miss Torres," he said quietly, "or should I say Captain Marev?" Rebecca's eyes flickered with something that might have been pain, old grief rising to the surface. "That name belongs to a dead woman, Colonel. I'm just Rebecca now." "The hell you are," Morrison snarled, struggling upright with his good arm. "This was orchestrated. You brought in a ringer to humiliate me in front of my personnel." Bradley turned to Morrison with a look that could freeze fire. "General Morrison, you humiliated yourself. All we did was provide the opportunity." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Questions no one dared ask, answers that would have to wait. But as Rebecca stood there in the center of that training mat, surrounded by witnesses to her unmasking, she realized something fundamental had shifted. The mask was broken. The disguise was shattered. 4 years, 7 months, and 12 days of invisibility had ended in 45 seconds of truth. And she wasn't sure if she felt relief or terror. Sometimes the hardest battle isn't against the enemy in front of you. It's against the person you used to be, the ghost that won't stay buried, the warrior who refuses to disappear, no matter how many filing cabinets you hide behind. Rebecca Torres had learned to be invisible, but Captain Marev, Desert Rose legend ghost, had never really left. She'd just been waiting, watching, preparing for the moment when the mask would finally slip. That moment had arrived, and there was no going back to being invisible, not anymore, not ever again. The question was, did she want to? The debriefing room was smaller than the training facility, more intimate, more suffocating. Rebecca sat in a metal chair that had witnessed countless interrogations, confessions, and career-ending conversations. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that particular frequency that made her teeth ache, Or maybe that was just tension. Hard to tell anymore. Colonel Bradley sat across from her, a manila folder thick with documents spread between them. Morrison was conspicuously absent, sent to the medical facility to have his arm examined. His ego would take longer to heal, but that wasn't Rebecca's problem. Not anymore. Captain Merev, Bradley began, then stopped when she flinched. Rebecca, he corrected, we need to talk about what happened out there. She laughed, not with humor, with something darker, more tired. What happened out there is I forgot who I was supposed to be. For 45 seconds I forgot I was dead. Bradley leaned back, studying her with eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness to be easily fooled. You were never dead, Captain, just missing in action. Is there a difference? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, she could hear soldiers moving through the facility, going about their day, training, learning, becoming the warriors they dreamed of being. None of them knew that one of the deadliest operators in modern military history had been filing their leave requests for the past 9 months. Bradley opened the folder. Your file makes for interesting reading, at least the parts that aren't redacted. He pulled out a photograph. A woman in Israeli Defense Forces uniform, younger but unmistakable, dark eyes that hadn't yet learned to hide, a slight smile that suggested confidence without arrogance. Merev Rosen, born in Tel Aviv, conscripted at 18, served in the intelligence corps before being selected for Shayatet 13 at 21. Youngest female operator in the unit's history. Rebecca didn't respond. She knew her own history. She tried to bury it for 6 years. Bradley continued, pulling out more documents, more photographs. 12 years of classified operations across 3 continents, hostage rescue in Somalia, counterterrorism in Lebanon, intelligence gathering in Iran. He looked up. Perfect mission record, not one failure, not one casualty on your team, the kind of record that becomes legend. Legends aren't real, Colonel. They're just stories people tell to make sense of things they don't understand. And Desert Rose, that was just a story. The name hit like a physical blow. Desert Rose, the moniker she'd earned during Operation Returning Echo, a hostage rescue mission in the Negev desert that had gone sideways fast. 3 operators down, extraction compromised, enemy combatants closing in. And Merev Rosen, not yet Desert Rose, making a series of decisions that saved 12 lives and earned her a reputation that would follow her forever. Desert Rose was necessary, Rebecca said finally. When you're a woman in special operations, you can't just be good. You have to be perfect. You have to be so good that they can't ignore you, can't dismiss you, can't question whether you belong. She met Bradley's eyes. So I became perfect. I became the operator who never failed, who never hesitated, who never showed weakness. And that worked. For 12 years, until it didn't. Bradley pulled out another photograph. This one was different, not a military portrait, not an operational photo, just a candid shot of Merev laughing with another operator, a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. In the photo, they looked young, happy, like people who believed they'd found something worth protecting. Rebecca's breath caught. Where did you get that? Your file, the classified portion. There's a whole section dedicated to Operation Silent Thunder, March 2019, Beirut. Bradley's voice softened. Do you want to talk about what happened? No, the word came out harsh, final, but Bradley waited, and silence has a weight that forces truth to the surface. Rebecca closed her eyes. His name was David Chen. He was my partner, not just in operations, in everything. She opened her eyes, staring at the photograph. We were extracting an intelligence asset from a compromised safe house in Beirut. Standard operation. Get in, get the asset, get out. We'd done it 100 times before. But this time was different. This time was different, she agreed. The intelligence was bad. The safe house wasn't compromised, it was a trap. They knew we were coming. They knew our protocols. They knew, she swallowed hard. They knew about David and me. knew that if one of us was in danger, the other would break protocol to help. Bradley said nothing. Sometimes the best interrogation technique is just listening. We entered from different points. David took the front. I went through the back. The asset was supposed to be on the second floor. Her voice had gone flat, distant. The way soldiers talk about trauma when they've learned to compartmentalize but never really heal. David reached him first, called it in. I was moving to his position when I heard the explosion. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in. Secondary device, triggered remotely. The whole second floor came down. She looked at her hands. They were steady now, but she remembered how they'd shaken that night, covered in blood and ash and the debris of a building that had become a tomb. I dug for 4 hours, moved rubble with my bare hands until my fingers bled. But I knew from the moment I heard the explosion that he was gone. Bradley gave her a moment. The report says you eliminated 7 enemy combatants during your extraction. The report is wrong, it was 9. She met his eyes with no shame, no hesitation. They took David from me. They used my love against me, turned it into a weapon, so I made them pay. And then you disappeared. And then I died, she corrected. Merev Rosen died in Beirut. They buried her with full military honors. My family sat Shiva. My unit moved on, and she gestured at herself. I became Rebecca Torres, file clerk, invisible woman, someone who couldn't lose anyone else because there was nothing left to lose. Bradley closed the folder slowly. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. What happened today, that wasn't a mistake. That was inevitable. You can't hide that kind of training, that kind of skill, that kind of, he searched for the right word, that kind of fire. Watch me. I have been watching you for 9 months, ever since you transferred here with a file that had more redactions than a classified war plan. He leaned forward. Do you know why I accepted your transfer request? Why I let you work in administrative when I knew damn well who you were? Rebecca frowned. You knew. From day one, your cover story was good. New identity, sealed records, but I've been in this business long enough to recognize an operator in hiding. He smiled slightly. The way you clear rooms before entering, the way you position yourself to watch exits, the way you assess everyone you meet like a potential threat. You can change your name, Rebecca. You can change your uniform, but you can't change 12 years of muscle memory. She felt something crack inside her chest. Relief, terror, both. So what happens now, she asked. Morrison will file complaints. There'll be an investigation, my cover. Your cover is already blown. Every soldier with a phone recorded what happened today. By tomorrow, it'll be on every military message board and social media platform. Desert Rose isn't dead anymore. She's very publicly alive and working at Camp Henderson. Rebecca closed her eyes. 6 years of careful anonymity destroyed in 45 seconds. I can't go back, Colonel. I can't be her again. That woman died in Beirut. Maybe she did, but the woman sitting in front of me, she's not just a file clerk either. Bradley stood, gathering his folder. You have a choice to make, Rebecca. You can keep running from who you were, keep hiding behind filing cabinets and oversized uniforms, or you can decide who you want to be now. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. He paused at the door. We have a combat instructor position opening up next month, training the next generation of special operators. The pay is the same as admin, but the work is different, if you're interested. He left before she could respond, the door closing with a soft click that sounded unnaturally loud in the empty room. Rebecca sat alone, surrounded by the ghosts of who she'd been and the uncertainty of who she might become. The photograph of her and David still lay on the table. In it, they looked invincible, like nothing could touch them, like love and skill and training were armor enough against the world's darkness. They'd been wrong, and David had paid the price for that wrongness with his life. But maybe, there was a difference between being Merev Rosen, the perfect operator who could never fail, and being Rebecca Torres, The woman who'd learned that perfection was just another form of hiding. Maybe there was a third option, something in between the legend and the ghost, something real. She picked up the photograph, studying David's smile. What would he tell her if he were here? Probably to stop being dramatic, to remember that the mission isn't about perfection, it's about showing up, about doing the work, about making a difference even if you're scared, especially if you're scared. "I miss you," she whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of a man who'd believed she could be both strong and human, who'd seen through the Desert Rose legend to the woman underneath, who'd loved that woman enough to die trying to protect something bigger than both of them. The room had no answer, ghosts rarely do, but somewhere in the silence, Rebecca made a decision. She wasn't ready to be a legend again, might never be ready, but maybe she could be a teacher, someone who helped others learn the skills that kept them alive, someone who could pass on 12 years of hard-earned knowledge without claiming it made her special or perfect or anything other than a survivor who'd gotten lucky more times than she probably deserved. She stood, straightening her uniform, the same oversized administrative uniform she'd worn for 9 months, but it felt different now, like a costume she was finally ready to put away. Outside the debriefing room, the facility continued its daily rhythm. Soldiers training, learning, becoming. None of them knew that the invisible file clerk had just decided to become visible again, not as Desert Rose the legend, not as Merav Rosen the perfect operator. Just as Rebecca, a woman who'd learned that hiding from pain doesn't make it disappear. It just makes you invisible to the people who might help you carry it. And maybe, just maybe, being seen was worth the risk of being hurt again. The news spread faster than a classified leak. By sunset, Desert Rose destroys General in 45 seconds was trending on military forums, Twitter, and every group chat from Fort Bragg to Ramstein Air Base. The video had been posted by at least 15 different soldiers. Some had added dramatic music. Others had included slow-motion replays with professional sports commentary. Rebecca watched the videos in her small apartment off base, a one-bedroom space she'd deliberately chosen for its anonymity. Generic furniture, minimal decoration, the kind of place that wouldn't reveal anything about the person living there. The perfect hideout for someone who wanted to disappear. Her phone buzzed constantly. Unknown numbers. Former colleagues who'd somehow gotten her new contact info. Journalists. One particularly persistent caller claimed to be from a Netflix documentary team interested in telling her story. She ignored them all. Some stories didn't need telling. But one call she couldn't ignore came at 2300 hours. An Israeli number she'd memorized years ago and sworn never to use again. Shalom, Merav. The voice was older now, rougher but unmistakable. Colonel Avi Goldstein, her former commanding officer in Shayatet 13. "I'm not Merav anymore," she said in Hebrew, the language feeling foreign and familiar simultaneously. "The internet disagrees. I've watched you destroy that American general 12 times now, still using the arm drag to rear takedown combination I taught you. You always did have excellent retention of training." Despite everything, Rebecca smiled. "Avi had that effect. Did you call to critique my technique?" "I called because you've been hiding for 6 years and now the world knows you're alive. That changes things." "It changes nothing. I'm done with that life." "Are you?" His voice was gentle but firm. The voice of a commander who'd seen too many operators burn out and knew the difference between someone who needed rest and someone who was running from ghosts. "Or are you just hiding from the possibility that you might still want it?" Rebecca moved to her window, looking out at Camp Henderson's perimeter lights. "David died because I wasn't good enough, because I trusted bad intelligence and walked into a trap designed specifically to kill us. David died because he was a soldier doing his job, the same job you did, the same job we all do, knowing the risks. I should have seen it coming, Should have questioned the intelligence, should have. Should have been perfect, Avi interrupted. Merav, you were the best operator I ever commanded, but you were never perfect. No one is. And the moment you started believing your own legend, Desert Rose, the operator who never fails, you stopped being effective. You became scared of making mistakes instead of learning from them. The words hit harder than Morrison's punches. What do you want, Avi? I want you to stop punishing yourself for being human. David loved you because you were human, not because you were perfect. He paused. There's an opening for a training liaison position. Joint operations between IDF and U.S. Special Forces, teaching defensive tactics to operators from both countries. It's based in Virginia, close to where you are now. No. At least think about it. You were meant to teach, Merav. You were meant to pass on what you learned, not hide in an administrative office filing paperwork. I said no. Fine, but I'm sending you the information anyway. When you're ready to stop hiding, the position will wait. He switched to English for his final words, knowing they'd land harder. David would want you to live, Merav, not just survive. There's a difference. The call ended, leaving Rebecca alone with her thoughts and the steady buzz of her still-ringing phone. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she did what she always did when memories became too heavy. She trained. Push-ups until her arms shook. Sit-ups until her core burned. Shadow boxing against opponents only she could see. The same training regimen she'd maintained for 6 years, even while filing paperwork and pretending to be someone who couldn't destroy a general in under a minute. At 400 hours, exhausted and sweat-soaked, she finally checked her email. Mixed in with interview requests and concerned messages from former teammates was one from Colonel Bradley. Subject line, "Tomorrow, 800, your decision." The email contained a single attachment, a job description for the combat instructor position. Requirements included advanced combat training, real-world operational experience, and the ability to teach defensive tactics to personnel at all skill levels. Preferred qualifications, special operations background. It was basically written for her, or for the person she used to be. The question was whether those were the same person anymore. Rebecca opened a different folder on her laptop, one she'd created 6 years ago and added to periodically, whenever the ghosts got too loud. It was titled David and contained photographs, emails, voice messages, the collected memories of a life she tried to bury. She clicked on a voice message. David's voice filled her small apartment, warm and alive and impossibly gone. "Hey Mary, just wanted to say I love you before we head out. I know you're probably stressing about the mission, you always do, but remember what I told you. We don't have to be perfect, we just have to be present. Show up, do the work, get everyone home safe. That's the mission. That's always been the mission. See you on the other side." Rebecca listened to it 3 times before she realized she was crying. Not the quiet, controlled tears of someone maintaining composure. The ugly, shaking sobs of someone who'd been holding grief inside for 6 years and finally let it surface. She cried for David, for the life they'd planned, for the operator she'd been before Beirut taught her that even Desert Rose could fail, for the 6 years she'd spent punishing herself by becoming invisible. And when she was done crying, when the tears had stopped and her breathing had steadied, she made a decision. She opened a reply to Colonel Bradley's email and typed 4 words, "I'll take the job." Then she deleted it and typed something more honest, "I'll try." Because maybe that's all any of them could do. Try, show up, be present, pass on what they'd learned so the next generation might survive what they'd barely lived through. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. At 600 hours, she went for a run. Not the slow, careful jog of someone trying to stay in shape. The punishing sprint of an operator preparing for deployment. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs screamed and the North Carolina sunrise painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She ran until she felt alive again, Not perfect, not legendary, just alive. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The first day of her new position started the way most military endeavors did, with paperwork and bureaucracy and the general sense that someone, somewhere, was taking perverse pleasure in making simple things complicated. Rebecca, she decided to keep using Rebecca rather than reclaim Marav, sat in Bradley's office reviewing course materials for basic defensive tactics. The curriculum was standard: strikes, holds, takedowns, escapes, the kind of techniques that might save a soldier's life in a close-quarters situation, but were taught with all the passion of a DMV employee explaining Form 27B6. "This needs work," she said, flipping through the manual. Bradley looked up from his computer. "Feel free to make improvements. That's why you're here. It's too theoretical, too clinical. These techniques work in training environments, but real combat is messy, chaotic. People don't stand still and let you execute perfect form. So teach them that." "I will," she set down the manual, "but I need to know something first. What happened with Morrison?" Bradley's expression darkened. "General Morrison is on administrative leave pending investigation into his conduct, creating a hostile environment, using military training exercises for personal humiliation, inappropriate treatment of subordinates." He paused. The video didn't help his case. "Will he face consequences?" "Probably a stern talking to and early retirement with full pension. That's how it works at his level." Bradley must have seen her frustration because he added, "But his reputation is destroyed. That video will follow him forever. Sometimes, public humiliation is more effective than official punishment." Rebecca thought about that, about Morrison's face when he realized who she was. The moment his worldview cracked and he understood that size and strength and 30 years of conventional wisdom meant nothing against someone with superior training and the willingness to use it. "He'll hate me forever," she said. "Probably. Can you live with that?" "I've lived with worse." The door opened without warning. A young soldier, couldn't be more than 22, stood at attention. "Sir, Captain Torres, the class is assembled and ready." Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. Captain Torres. She'd agreed to keep her rank from her IDF service, translated to equivalent U.S. military standing. It felt strange, like wearing someone else's uniform. "Lead the way," she said, standing. The training facility looked different in daylight. Less ominous, more like what it was, a place where people learned skills that might save their lives. The assembled class consisted of 30 soldiers, mixed gender and experience levels, all looking at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. She recognized some faces from the demonstration, soldiers who'd watched her destroy Morrison, who'd seen Desert Rose emerge from behind the file clerk disguise. They expected a legend, a perfect operator who never failed. That scared her more than any operation ever had. "I'm Captain Torres," she began, her voice carrying across the facility. "Some of you saw me last week in an unplanned demonstration. Some of you have probably Googled Desert Rose and read all sorts of dramatic stories. Let me be clear, forget all of that. I'm not here to be a legend. I'm here to teach you techniques that might save your life someday." She walked to the center of the mat, the same spot where she'd stood with Morrison. "Real combat isn't like the movies. It's not choreographed. It's not fair. It's fast, brutal, and terrifying. The person who wins isn't always the strongest or the fastest. It's usually the person who stays calm, remembers their training, and makes good decisions under pressure." A hand went up. Specialist Jenkins, if Rebecca remembered correctly. "Is it true you have a perfect mission record? Over 150 engagements with 0 failures?" The question hung in the air. Everyone leaned forward slightly, waiting for confirmation of the legend. Rebecca could have lied, could have maintained the mystique, could have let them believe she was some kind of superhuman operator who never made mistakes. Instead, she told the truth. "I failed once," she said quietly. "The most important mission of my life. I trusted bad intelligence. I let love cloud my judgment. And my partner, the best operator I ever worked with, died because of my mistakes." The silence was absolute, not what they'd expected, not the legend they wanted. "That failure taught me more than 150 successful missions ever did. It taught me that perfect doesn't exist, that being good at combat doesn't make you invincible, that survival is often a combination of skill, preparation, and luck." She met each student's eyes in turn. "I can teach you skill, I can help you prepare, but I can't control luck. All I can do is make sure you have the best chance possible when luck runs out." Specialist Chen, no relation to David but the name still hurt, raised her hand. "Why defensive tactics? Why not offensive?" "Because I've killed 9 people in my career, some in defense, some in retaliation, and every single one of them still visits me at night." Rebecca's voice remained steady, but the words cost her. "I can teach you how to kill, that's the easy part. What I want to teach you is how to survive without killing, how to control a situation, how to defend yourself and your team, how to make it home." She gestured to the mat. "Pair up, basic exercise. One person attacks with a right cross. Partner defends with proper slip and counter. We're going to do this for an hour. It's going to be boring, it's going to be repetitive, and it's going to save your life someday." The students paired up, moving to their positions. Rebecca walked among them, correcting stances, adjusting angles, offering guidance. This was different from operations, different from the adrenaline rush of combat. This was patient, methodical teaching. It was also harder than any mission she'd ever run. Halfway through the class, she noticed one student struggling. Private Morrison. And yes, it was General Morrison's son, because of course the universe had a sense of irony. The kid was trying too hard, telegraphing his movements, leaving himself open. Rebecca could have ignored him, could have let him figure it out on his own, could have let him fail as revenge for his father's arrogance. Instead, she walked over. "Morrison, your footwork is wrong. You're leading with your shoulder, which tells your opponent exactly where the punch is going." The kid looked at her with a mixture of fear and resentment. "I know who you are, what you did to my father." "What I did to your father was respond to his attack with appropriate force. What I'm doing now is trying to teach you so you don't make the same mistakes." She demonstrated the proper technique. "Try again. This time, don't telegraph." Morrison attempted the punch again. Still wrong, but improving. "Better, but your weight distribution is off. Here." She adjusted his stance manually, the way David used to adjust hers during training. The memory stung, but she pushed through it. "Feet shoulder width apart. Weight on the balls of your feet. Stay mobile. A stationary target is a dead target." Morrison tried again. This time it was almost right. "Good. Now do it 500 more times until it's muscle memory." By the end of the class, Rebecca was exhausted in a way that combat had never made her. Teaching required a different kind of energy, patience, repetition, the ability to see 30 different learning styles and adapt to each one. As the students filed out, several approached with questions, tips, clarification on techniques. She answered each one, drawing diagrams, demonstrating variations, offering the kind of personalized instruction that no manual could provide. Specialist Jenkins lingered after everyone else had left. "Captain Torres, can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask, can't promise I'll answer." "Why come back? After everything you've been through, after losing your partner, why not just stay hidden?" Rebecca considered the question. It deserved honesty. "Because hiding didn't make the pain go away. It just made me invisible. And I realized something last week during that demonstration with General Morrison. I'd rather be seen and hurt than invisible and safe. At least when you're seen, you have a chance to matter." Jenkins nodded slowly. "That makes sense. Thanks, Captain." After the specialist left, Rebecca stood alone in the training facility. The same space where she'd destroyed Morrison, where she'd revealed herself, where everything had changed. She thought about David, about Avi's words, about the difference between surviving and living. Maybe teaching wasn't about passing on the legend of Desert Rose. Maybe it was about sharing the lessons of Merev Rosen, the operator who'd made mistakes and learned from them, who'd loved and lost and somehow kept going, who'd failed the most important mission of her life but refused to let that failure define her forever. Maybe that's what these students needed. Not a perfect legend, but a real person who'd survived imperfection and could teach them to do the same. She locked up the facility and headed home, her phone buzzing with a new message. Colonel Bradley, good first day, but you're teaching Tuesday's Advanced Class 2. They specifically requested you. Rebecca smiled despite herself. Advanced probably meant soldiers who wanted to test themselves against Desert Rose, who wanted to say they'd trained with the legend. They'd be disappointed. Desert Rose wasn't teaching that class. Just Rebecca, a woman who'd learned that legends were burdens but lessons were gifts. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the next generation needed. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, David's ghost visited with the regularity of a scheduled appointment. But Rebecca kept teaching, kept showing up, kept being present in a way she hadn't been since Beirut. The combat instructor position became something more. She developed new curriculum, created realistic scenario training, brought in guest speakers from various special operations units. She even coordinated with Avi's office to establish a formal exchange program between U.S. and Israeli defensive tactics instruction. The students called her Captain T or just Captain. Never Desert Rose, never Merev. She'd made it clear on day one, legends weren't welcome in her classroom, just people willing to learn. Word spread through military communities. The file clerk who destroyed a general, the Israeli operator teaching real-world tactics, the woman who'd survived everything and came back to teach others how to do the same. Training requests came from other bases, guest instructor positions, even a few lucrative private sector offers from contractors who wanted the Desert Rose mystique for their programs. She declined them all. Camp Henderson was where she needed to be. These students, flawed, eager, sometimes frustrating, were who she needed to teach. On a Tuesday afternoon in April, Rebecca was running advanced situational awareness training when Colonel Bradley appeared at the facility entrance with someone she didn't recognize. A woman in civilian clothes, early 30s, with the bearing of someone military-trained but long removed from active service. "Captain Torres," Bradley called, "can you spare a few minutes?" Rebecca instructed her students to continue their exercise and walked over. Up close, the woman looked familiar, something about the eyes, the way she held herself. "Captain Torres, this is Sarah Chen, she's David's sister," Rebecca finished, her voice catching. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same eyes, same slight build, same way of standing that suggested coiled energy barely contained. Sarah nodded. "I've been trying to find you for 5 years. You're very good at disappearing." "It's a learned skill." Rebecca's heart was pounding. This was not a conversation she'd prepared for. "I'm sorry about David, about everything, if I could go back." "That's not why I'm here." Sarah's voice was firm but not unkind. "Can we talk, somewhere private?" Bradley gestured to his office. The three of them walked in silence, the weight of unspoken history hanging between them like fog. Once inside with the door closed, Sarah pulled out a folder. "I work for the Defense Intelligence Agency now. Analyst, not field operative, but I've been tracking something for the past year that I think you need to see." She spread photographs across Bradley's desk. Surveillance images, tactical assessments, intelligence reports. "The cell that killed David," Sarah said without preamble. "They're still active, operating out of Beirut and Damascus. They've been responsible for 3 more targeted operations against coalition forces in the past 18 months. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. You're telling me the people who murdered David are still out there, still killing? Yes, and DIA is putting together a task force to eliminate them. Permanent solution. No more operations, no more traps, just gone. Sarah met Rebecca's eyes. They want operators with specific expertise, people who know the terrain, who understand how this cell operates, who have personal stake in the mission. The implication was clear. They wanted Desert Rose. No, Rebecca said immediately. I'm done with operations. I teach now. That's where I belong. Is it? Sarah's voice was gentle. Or are you still hiding? I'm not hiding. I'm living. There's a difference. My brother loved you enough to walk into that building knowing it might be a trap because you needed backup, because that's what partners do. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Don't let his death mean you stop living, but also don't pretend that teaching is all you're capable of. David wouldn't want you to waste your skills out of guilt. Rebecca looked at the photographs, recognized locations, understood the tactical assessments, could see exactly how she'd approach this mission, what routes she'd use, what teams she'd assemble, how she'd finish what that Beirut operation had started. Part of her wanted it, wanted the closure, wanted to make the people who killed David pay in a permanent, final way. But another part, the part that had spent 6 months teaching students to stay alive, to make good decisions under pressure, to value life even when surrounded by death, that part knew the truth. Revenge won't bring him back, Rebecca said quietly. I killed 9 people after David died, eliminated every hostile in that building. It didn't make the pain stop. It didn't bring him back. It just made me someone who lived with 9 more ghosts. This isn't revenge, Sarah corrected. This is preventing future attacks, saving lives. Isn't that what you teach? Defensive tactics, protecting yourself and your team. Sarah, Rebecca's voice was tired. I understand what you're offering. I understand why it seems like justice, but I can't. I've spent 6 months teaching students that every life matters, that killing should be last resort. That survival isn't about body count. It's about making choices you can live with. She gestured at the photos. If I go back to operations, if I become Desert Rose again, I'm telling those students that everything I taught them was a lie. Even if more people die because this cell stays active. It was a fair question, a hard question, the kind of moral calculus that special operations required and that had no easy answers. Bradley, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Captain Torres, you're under no obligation to participate in this operation. Your service to this country, to 2 countries, has been exemplary. No one would question your decision either way. Rebecca looked at David's sister, saw the pain there, the desperate hope that eliminating the people who killed her brother might somehow make sense of senseless loss. She understood that hope, had lived with it for 6 years. I'll consult, Rebecca said finally. I'll review the intelligence, provide tactical recommendations, help plan the operation, but I won't deploy. My operational days are done. Sarah's face fell. But you're the best the team needs. The team needs someone who wants to be there, who can make clear-headed decisions without personal vendettas clouding judgment. Rebecca's voice was firm. That's not me, not for this mission, but I can help them succeed. I can give them every advantage my experience provides, just not in the field. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Rebecca's expression, the absolute certainty of someone who'd made peace with their decision, stopped her. Okay, Sarah said finally. Consultation, that's better than nothing. After Sarah left, Bradley poured 2 glasses of bourbon from a bottle he kept in his desk drawer. Not regulation, but then again, very little about Rebecca's situation was. You made the right choice, he said, handing her a glass. Did I? People might die because I'm not there. People might die because you are there, second-guessing yourself, seeking closure instead of completing the mission. Bradley sipped his bourbon. "You're a teacher now, Rebecca. That's not less important than being an operator. It's just different important." Rebecca drank, feeling the burn. "David's sister thinks I'm a coward." "David's sister is grieving. She wants someone to blame, someone to punish. You're choosing a harder path, living with ambiguity, teaching others while accepting you can't save everyone." He refilled both glasses. "That takes more courage than any operation." Later that night in her apartment, Rebecca opened her laptop and began reviewing the intelligence Sarah had left. The patterns were familiar, the tactics predictable. She could see exactly how this cell operated, their strengths, their weaknesses, where they were vulnerable. She wrote a tactical assessment that was 30 pages long, detailed entry points, recommended team composition, identified 3 separate approaches with probability of success for each. She included every piece of knowledge from 12 years of operations, every lesson learned, every mistake to avoid. At the end, she added a note. "This cell killed someone I loved. Every instinct I have screams for revenge, but revenge and justice aren't the same thing. Execute this mission because it saves future lives, not because it settles old scores. The moment you make it personal, you've already failed. Trust your training, trust your team. Come home alive." She sent the assessment to Sarah at 300 hours, then opened the folder labeled David. But instead of listening to old voice messages, she created a new document, started writing down every lesson David had taught her, every piece of wisdom, every stupid joke he'd made during training that somehow contained profound truth. She wrote until sunrise, creating a training manual that had nothing to do with combat techniques and everything to do with being a good partner, a good operator, a good human being in situations designed to strip away humanity. She titled it Operating with Heart, Lessons from David Chen, and saved it in her teaching materials folder. Because maybe that's how you honor the dead, not by seeking revenge, not by continuing their missions, but by passing on what they taught you, by making sure their wisdom survives even when they don't. The next day, she taught her regular class. Basic defensive tactics, nothing glamorous, nothing legendary, just 30 students learning to slip punches and control attackers and make decisions under pressure. And for the first time in 6 years, Rebecca felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because it was easy, not because it erased the pain, but because it was real, because it mattered, because every student who learned to survive was a small victory against the darkness that had taken David. Desert Rose might have been a legend, but Rebecca Torres was becoming something better. She was becoming someone who chose life over vengeance, teaching over violence, hope over grief. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most powerful choice she could make. The operation against the Beirut cell happened 3 months later. Rebecca wasn't there. She was teaching an advanced night operations course when the news came through official channels. Mission successful, cell eliminated, 0 friendly casualties. She read the brief report in Colonel Bradley's office, her hand steady on the paper. No names, no details, just confirmation that the people who'd killed David were no longer a threat. "How do you feel?" Bradley asked. Rebecca considered the question, really considered it. "I don't know, I thought I'd feel relief, or satisfaction, or something." She set down the report. "Mostly I just feel tired." "That's normal. Closure doesn't work the way people think it does." "No," she agreed, "it doesn't." Sarah Chen sent her an email that night, just 3 lines. "They're gone. David can rest now. Thank you for your help." Rebecca didn't respond immediately. She sat with the words, trying to figure out how she felt about David resting now. As if death was something you did more or less peacefully depending on whether your killers were brought to justice. She didn't believe that. David was dead. He'd been dead for 6 years. The operation didn't change that, didn't bring him back, didn't make Beirut unhappen. but maybe it prevented the next Beirut. The next operator lost to bad intelligence and elaborate traps. The next partner destroyed by loving someone in a profession designed to kill love along with everything else. That had to count for something. She finally responded, "He could always rest. That was never about them. It was about us learning to let him." Sarah's response came immediately, "Are you letting him go?" Rebecca stared at that question for a long time. Was she letting David go? She'd built a new life, found purpose in teaching, made peace with being seen again, but she still listened to his voice messages, still kept his photo on her private laptop, still woke up some mornings expecting him to be there. Maybe letting go wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about choosing to move forward while carrying the memories with you. Like scar tissue, part of you, proof of survival but not the whole story anymore. She wrote back, "I'm learning how, slowly, imperfectly, but learning." The next morning, she deleted the David folder from her laptop. Not permanently. She backed it up to an encrypted drive first, but removing it from her daily digital life felt significant, like acknowledging that he belonged to her past, not her present. It hurt, but it also felt right. She threw herself into work with renewed energy, expanded her curriculum to include psychological resilience training, combat stress management, how to process trauma without letting it destroy you, the kind of content that no military manual included but every operator needed. Her classes grew. Word spread about the operator who taught real-world lessons, not just techniques, who talked about failure and fear and the cost of combat, who treated students like complete humans, not just fighting machines. General Morrison's son, Private James Morrison, became one of her best students. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but the kid had talent and hunger to learn, and Rebecca had learned that holding grudges was just another form of carrying dead weight. "You're nothing like my father said you'd be," James admitted after a particularly grueling training session. "What did he say?" "That you were dangerous, unstable, that the military made a mistake letting you teach." James hesitated. "But he says that about everyone who makes him look bad. I stopped listening to him about 6 months ago." Rebecca felt something unexpected, sympathy for Morrison Sr., a man so trapped in his own ego that he destroyed his relationship with his son along with his career. "Your father is a product of a different military culture," she said carefully, "one that valued dominance over competence, strength over skill. It worked for him for 30 years, until it didn't." She looked at James. "Don't make his mistakes, but don't dismiss everything he taught you either. Take the useful parts. Leave the toxic parts. Become your own kind of soldier." James nodded slowly. "Is that what you did with your training?" "Eventually. Took me 12 years and a lot of mistakes to figure it out." "What changed?" Rebecca thought about Beirut, about David, about 6 years of hiding followed by 45 seconds of truth. "I stopped trying to be perfect, started trying to be present instead. Turns out that's harder but more sustainable." Classes ended, students filed out, but James lingered. "Captain Torres, I wanted to ask. My father, he's been trying to contact me, wants to meet, talk things through." The kid looked miserable. "Part of me wants nothing to do with him, but part of me thinks maybe he deserves a chance." Rebecca understood the weight of that decision. "Can I tell you something that has nothing to do with combat training?" "Yes, ma'am." "Forgiveness isn't about them, it's about you, about deciding whether carrying anger serves you or poisons you." She thought about her own journey, about choosing to teach rather than seek revenge. "Your father made mistakes, hurt you, hurt me, but he's also the person who raised you, who taught you discipline and honor even if he didn't always embody those values himself." She met James's eyes. "You get to decide what relationship you want with him. But make that decision based on who you want to be, not on who he was." "That's actually helpful, thank you, Captain." After he left, Rebecca locked up the facility and walked to her car. The North Carolina evening was humid and heavy, promising rain. She drove home slowly, thinking about forgiveness and letting go, and all the ways humans try to make peace with imperfect pasts. Her apartment felt different now, less like a hiding place, more like a home. She'd added personal touches, photos of students at graduations, thank you cards from people she'd taught, a coffee mug someone had gifted her that said "World's Okayest Combat Instructor" because they knew she'd appreciate the mediocrity more than excellence. She made dinner, actual cooking, not the survival rations she'd lived on for years, and ate while reading a book about trauma recovery in military personnel, research for her expanded curriculum, but also personal interest, understanding her own journey by studying others. Her phone buzzed. Avi, texting from Tel Aviv, saw the news about the Beirut cell. "How are you?" She typed back, "Okay, really okay actually." "Good, because I have another offer for you. Temporary teaching position in Israel, 3 months. Combat psychology for Shayatet recruits. Interested?" 6 months ago, she would have said no immediately. Would have found a dozen reasons why going back to Israel was impossible. Too many memories, too much pain, too dangerous for her carefully constructed new life. But now, reading Avi's offer, she felt something different. Not fear, not anxiety, just curiosity. The possibility of sharing her hard-earned wisdom with the next generation of operators from the unit that had made her who she was. "Let me think about it," she wrote back. "Take your time. Position doesn't open until September." Rebecca set down her phone and looked around her apartment. At the life she'd built, the person she'd become, not Desert Rose the legend, not Merev Rosen the perfect operator, not even Rebecca Torres the invisible file clerk. Just Rebecca, a teacher who'd learned that strength wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and healing again, and showing up anyway. She thought about David, about what he'd say if he could see her now. Probably something about how it took her long enough to figure out what he'd known all along, that she was stronger when she let people see her struggles than when she pretended to have none. She opened her laptop and began drafting a response to Avi. Not yes, not no, but a detailed list of conditions, topics she would teach, topics she wouldn't, boundaries she needed, support she required. It was the response of someone who knew her value, who understood her limitations, who refused to be either invisible or legendary, choosing instead to be human. The rain started as she finished typing, soft at first, then building to a steady downpour that drummed against her windows like applause, or maybe like tears. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. She sent the email to Avi, then opened a new document, started writing a letter she'd never send. "Dear David," it began, "I'm learning to let you go, not forget you, I'll never forget you, but let you rest while I keep living. It's harder than any mission we ran together. Some days I fail, but I keep trying. That's what you taught me. That showing up matters more than being perfect. That presence is more powerful than perfection." She wrote until the rain stopped, until the words ran dry, until she'd said everything she needed to say to a ghost who couldn't answer but whose silence somehow still felt like listening. When she finally slept, she dreamed of training facilities filled with students, of showing them how to slip punches and control opponents and survive encounters designed to kill them, of passing on lessons earned through pain and failure and loss. In the dream, David stood in the back of the classroom, not speaking, not interfering, just watching with that smile that suggested he'd known all along how the story would end. With Rebecca finally understanding that dignity doesn't always speak. Sometimes it simply acts, not through revenge or violence or dramatic demonstrations, but through the quiet choice to keep showing up, keep teaching, keep living. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because that's what real strength looks like. Not perfection, not dominance, not being unbreakable. Just the refusal to stay broken, the commitment to keep trying, the courage to be seen. Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and a sense of peace she hadn't felt in 6 years. She had work to do, students to teach, lessons to share, a life to live. Not as a legend, not as a ghost, just as Rebecca, and somehow that was more than enough. It was everything. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. It shows up day after day, carrying wounds that never fully heal but learning to function around them. It teaches others so they might avoid the same pain. It chooses life over vengeance, presence over perfection, hope over grief. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't forget those who were lost. It doesn't pretend that survival means the pain disappears. It just keeps going, keeps trying, keeps showing up. And in that persistence, that stubborn refusal to let trauma have the final word, dignity finds its truest expression. Not in dramatic moments or legendary victories, but in the quiet choice made every morning to be visible, to be present, to be human. That's what Rebecca Torres learned. That's what she teaches now. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all.